Hello, friends. My name is Michael Levine, and we're on another expedition today of Without Notes in our 11th season. And I am honored that our guest today is General David Petraeus, one of the most esteemed military leaders of our time, former head of the CIA, and just an outstanding ambassador of the rules of success in life, professionally and personally. I'm looking forward to this conversation. I think you'll get a lot out of it. And very honored to be here with General David Petraeus. Welcome, General.
Good to be with you, Michael. Thank you.
Well, it's good to have you here. General, let's start, if we might, with just some basic biographical information. Where were you born?
Cornwall, New York. There was a hospital there that our village, where I was from Cornwall and Hudson, New York, which happens to be 7 miles north of West Point, the U.S. Military Academy around Storm King Mountain.
That location proved prophetic. I was born, General, 2.5 miles north of Ground Zero. And so you are talking now to one of the very few Americans alive who had the distinction of watching the World Trade Center be built twice. And yeah, so anyway, honored to have you, General. You were born there, raised there. If I had met you, say, did you go to high school in that area?
Yeah, went to Cornwall Central High School. Yep.
And if I had met you in high school, General, would you have appeared to my eye to have been from a middle class home, an upper middle class home, a lower middle class home? What would that have looked like?
Oh, I think it was very solid middle class. My father was actually a Dutch ship's officer when the Nazis overran Holland. He and his crew were at sea at the time. They couldn't go home. They came to the United States. They turned into Brooklyn Navy Yard and asked if they were hiring. They were. Of course, this is before the U.S. had entered the war. So they joined the U.S. Merchant Marine. He sailed throughout the war, some pretty harrowing events, including a convoy to Murmansk, up, of course, in northern Russia, or northern Soviet Union at that time, in which a U-boat and a battleship got loose in the convoy. They had to scatter. Half the ships were lost, but he made it, obviously. He met my mother at the Seamen's Institute there. She was doing her thing for those who were at war for our country. And then they moved 50 miles up the Hudson River. He continued to sail. He was a ship's captain, a master mariner. He could be the captain of any size ship in the world. But in the post-war boom, they wanted the captains to sail 11 months straight before they got 1 month off. And they did that for a few years, and then they decided that was just not a way to raise a family. So he became a supervisory operating engineer in a power generating station near our home.
General, brothers and sisters?
Yep, had a sister several years older, brilliant, skipped in high school and all this stuff.
Were you considered a good student in high school, General?
Yeah, no, I was certainly in the honor roll. I was a varsity letterman. I was in youth and government. I led the combined youth activities of the various churches in the town, actually, which is quite extraordinary given that there's usually one congressional nomination per district. And we also, I was on the soccer team, and we won the championship our senior year. And interestingly, our coach was a retired Army colonel who had coached at West Point many years earlier and won the national title. And he was doing this as $1 a year in retirement, his contribution to the community in which he retired.
And General, you were a good student, but were you good naturally, or did you work your tail off at it, or a little of both? Because some people are just
I think it was a combination of both. As it turned out at West Point, I realized that if you worked pretty hard and were focused and disciplined, there I was actually in the top 5% of the class, which is called a starman. You literally wear stars on your collar, even though the competition was obviously very fierce. So yeah, no, I had a good scholastic record in high school, and arguably an even better one at West Point, even though I was playing several seasons a year of intercollegiate athletics. I was soccer in the fall, on the ski team in the winter, and then soccer in the spring. And that's a fairly rigorous lineup, if you will, because you're right on the edge of what you need in terms of sleep. So I had to be very organized and again, very focused. And there was not much further in the way of time at night. I needed to get the rest because I was going to beat my brains out on the soccer field or on the ski team the next afternoon.
And you were doing this, General, in a terribly competitive environment. So you had to really, really laser focus. Then
Yeah,
let's
there
talk.
was a moment where I sort of realized I could actually very much compete. I mean, one of the adages I believe very strongly in now, and when people ask, what advice do you have for the next generation or maybe the next generation's generation, it's that life is a competitive endeavor. You have to understand that and embrace it. You don't get a trophy just for showing up like little kids soccer. You get it for excellence. But even as you're trying to be the best, it's certainly at least the very best that you can be, you also want to be the best team player. And there were some events later on in years where this played out. I was one of two members of my West Point class that were cadet captains, so the rank and the leadership structure, starman, top 5% academically, and varsity letterman. And as this went on in Ranger School, right after graduating from West Point, there were three awards and I won all three of them. But one of them was not just, again, for sort of performance, it was actually being the best Ranger buddy you could be. So it was a teamwork award.
A team, yeah.
There was a number one award. Then there was another award they only gave every few classes, and they deemed that I should get that time. And then there was the other one. It was for a combination of land navigation and your peer ratings. And again, it sort of drives home that what you should be trying to do is be the best, but also be the best team player, even as you're trying to be the best individually.
If you had been on your journey that you, at this point in your life, in today's environment, how has the world changed? In other words, in your military life and in your life generally, the participation trophy has taken on a large part of the culture. And this is to the detriment of our society, I would think. So, do you think that the same rules pertain today and they're just not maybe as popular as they once were?
Oh, no, I think they very much pertain today. And now I have the advantage of having been in the private sector for over 12 and a half years and a partner in an investment firm in what is arguably the most competitive landscape in the world, the investment world, the finance world. And again, we don't do charity here. We hire people who actually will do what I just described, which is the very best they can do, but also being the very best team players they can be as well. We want people to work across the firm, to use the whole brain, as we say. And you do that by, again, not just looking out for yourself. You do that by looking out for the team and the overall team. There's actually teams of teams, to use a term that was made famous by a great combat mate of mine, General Stan McChrystal.
General, as you begin your military career with this tremendous resume, tremendous degree of success, what role does serendipity play in your life, both personally and professionally? How do you meet your wife? What becomes some human elements that add into your rigorous achievement record?
Well, look, there is timing in life, and later on in my career, obviously, I happened to be in the right place at the right time when the nation needed us in the post 9/11 wars, and I happened to be commanding a division. But then you have to prove yourself, and you have to prove yourself at each successive level, and that's true of the early years as well. I got my first assignment because I was the number two in the class that chose infantry, and there were three slots of this great unit, an airborne unit in Vicenza. I did meet my wife at West Point. It was a blind date. I was a bit concerned to find out that she was the daughter of the West Point superintendent, in other words, the three-star general. She was a bit concerned to find out that I was not the guy that the wife on post had told her mother they were going to set her up with. Anyway, it all turned out right. I was very sensitive about that. wouldn't announce the engagement until the final chain of command selections were announced. So there wasn't any sense that, I got to be on the brigade staff as a cadet captain because of who my future father-in-law was going to be. And in a way, that was very fortunate in a professional way. It was also a wonderful personal way. But to have someone who, if he eventually had 2 4-star assignments, and was obviously a great mentor. In a lot of ways, he was what I wanted to be like. I wanted to be a soldier and a scholar and an athlete as well. So obviously that helps. But again, it doesn't do more than perhaps get you in a door on occasion. And the truth is that after my first assignment, I never actually had to ask for an assignment again because people were asking for me. They said, we want you to come here. Or this general would say, I'm pulling him out of West Point. I want him to be my speechwriter when I take over as Supreme Allied Commander Europe. Or I want him to be the aide to the Chief of Staff of the Army. Or. But again, I think you have to recognize that luck, and that timing is luck as well. Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. I was very, very serious about preparing for the opportunities that might come along. And I tried to create some opportunities for myself at various times as well. For example, I didn't go to the War College. I chose to do a fellowship at Georgetown, and in part because I thought that I might actually get out of that fellowship to do something in Haiti where we were beginning operations. And it turned out, lo and behold, the individual designated as the force commander of the United Nations force, not the U.S. force. He was a U.S. Army 2-star. But he called up midway through that year and said, how would you like to do Haiti instead of studying Haiti? He said, I just fired my chief of operations and I'd like you to replace him. But I need you to get down here pretty quickly because we take over in 2 months. And I did. So, and I was still given credit for the fellowship, which got me credit for the War College. But again, I think you can make your own luck. You can strive to enjoy certain opportunities, but at the end of the day, it's about performance. I mean, the idea that this stuff is strictly about politics or it's about that you're a good golf partner or tennis partner for the boss, that is just nonsensical. What bosses want is an individual who can help them think, help them communicate, help them write, advise them at critical moments, give them energy sometimes, whatever it may be, and certainly make sure all the trains run on time and the rest of that kind of stuff. But, when years later, when I was seeking speechwriters and designated thinkers and hired pens, again, all I wanted, I was looking at them as individuals. Didn't matter, again, gender, race, whatever else is in the mix. I'm looking for somebody who can help me expand my impact in specific fields. And that's the name of the game. And the same is true about KKR. Again, we don't do charity here. We do charity. Actually, we have a big philanthropic activity, but we don't do it when we're hiring people. We're looking for the best and brightest. We're in a position where we can afford to get the best and brightest, usually from other firms where they have proven themselves for a few years before we pick them to come to KKR. It's the most extraordinary workforce with which I have ever worked. And that includes the most extraordinary in government, which is the CIA, and the most extraordinary in the military, which is a variety of different, very elite units, all of which I was privileged to have in the commands that I oversaw during the wars in Iraq and then in U.S. Central Command.
General, you're a member of a society that has adapted an attitude toward victimhood that I think is deeply concerning. Today, it seems that there's almost a sweepstakes underway for who can be a greater victim of one type or another. Now, of course, I think this is very poisonous to a person and to a society. And I wondered if you could talk about how you have seen this play out and what advice do you have for people who are part of a society in which victimhood is almost considered some kind of triumph?
Yeah, I must confess, I don't see a great deal of that. I tend to be in organizations where people have had to raise their hand. often at very difficult times, such as the post 9/11 generation, which I believe should be identified as America's new greatest generation, very much the equal of the World War II generation, nowhere near as large, obviously, but the equal of those who volunteered to go off to war in World War II. So again, if you have been privileged to serve with, to lead individuals who raised their right hand, took an oath of service at a time of war after our nation was attacked, there aren't too many folks that are playing the victimhood card. They're out there again, knowing that what they want to do is serve a mission larger than self. They feel privileged to do that and to serve with others who feel the same way. Now, keep in mind that people volunteer for the military or the CIA or for other government missions and so forth. They volunteer because there is a sense of mission larger than self. You're protecting our nation after it's been attacked. But when the close fight, what you're focused on is the individual on your right and left. And again, it doesn't matter what color they are. It doesn't matter any of these other distinguishing features. What matters is whether they're carrying their share of the load and whether they've got your right flank or your left flank or your back. And you're worried that you do the same thing for each of them. So I'm not in those circles and I'm not,
It's not something you
as a
relate to.
student of society. Again, there aren't too many victims that in the KKRs of the world.
The
world in which I'm engaged is, again, arguably the most competitive in the world. It's certainly among those. I'm also a personal venture capitalist, and I've invested in over 30 startups. I don't see, again, you don't get ahead in that competitive world either.
With a
by
victim.
playing the victim card, you get ahead by showing that you can be exceptional, that you've developed a great big idea, and that you can scale that big idea while remaining the leader of that particular endeavor.
Let's talk about KKR, where you find yourself today. I think you indicated 12 years. Talk about what brought you to KKR, what's its uniqueness, because let's be honest, General, you had the choice of just about anything in the world you wanted. Talk about people raising their hands. There were a lot of people wanting to raise their hands for you to be on their team, but yet you chose KKR. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, first of all, so some of those that wanted me to raise my hand or they were raising my hand for me, I'm non-political. I don't even register to vote. I stopped when I was promoted to 2 stars and I never started. And that's ruled out what some folks had hoped I might do, which I was never seeking to do. When I left government, I knew Henry Kravis quite well. I met just in a circumstance where his wife saw that I was going to do an event at the Council on Foreign Relations in New York when I was a 4-star. I think between Iraq and Afghanistan, she sent me an email that said, I see you're going to be there. They're not feeding you. Why don't you let us host you at our house and you can invite anybody you want? And I took that seriously. And I said, well, how about Henry Kissinger, Mayor Bloomberg, Police Chief Kelly, Ambassador Holbrooke, a number of other individuals, every one of whom showed up. And it was a delightful
That's
experience.
great.
You sit around a round table, you sing for your supper, and I enjoy doing that and having that kind of intellectual exchange. Fouad Ajami, a noted Mideast intellectual, was there as well. So it was a great evening. We kept up. I did it again. I invited them to my retirement ceremony. They showed up. I did something with them. I went there again as CIA director, did something with him as a director as well. And he called up and said, would like to talk to you about what you might do here. And what happened is there were a number of other opportunities, and some of them very, very serious, in the same industry, generally, of different types of hedge funds or whatever. But what excited me about KKR's offer is that they wanted me to establish a new entity to chair it. And that entity would perform the geopolitical risk assessment during the diligence process as we're looking at companies and considering investing in them, buying them generally, although we do minority investments as well. That is hugely intellectually stimulating. It's what I've been doing, essentially, if you will, in uniform and as a CI director. The difference is instead of doing it for the national security team, you're doing it for the investment committee of one of the world's, it is the world's largest private equity firm and one of the world's largest overall investment firms. In fact, during the time I've been at KKR, which is now over 12 and a half years, we have grown from $83 billion in assets under management to nearly 700 billion. So it's been an extraordinary period. And I find the intellectual stimulation still as enjoyable and exciting today as I did at the very beginning. And now we've built a small team of extraordinary quality individuals. So we're hiring a new associate right now. And I think we had over 1,000 qualified applicants, really impressive ones. So it's great. And then when the companies run into problems and no one else can solve them, my team and I can go out and do. We have a great record. It's 60 different times we've been asked to help figure out how to get through something, and we've been able to do it in virtually every single case. That plays on the relationships. If you commanded two coalitions at war, one was over 35 countries, the other over 60. Almost every country in which we invest was part of that. They do remember that. And then, of course, I was CIA director as well. And I travel a great deal. This year it will have been to 30 different countries, many of them more than one time. So you hustle. And again, KKR didn't hire me out of charitable notions. They hired me to perform, and that's exactly what we've sought to do. And it seems to be a huge asset to the firm. Then we also spend a lot of time, obviously, with existing and potential investors talking about the world in which we're all trying to invest successfully together. And they allow me to teach at Yale. I'm the Kissinger Fellow up there. I do it they allowed me to do a book. All the profits of that went to veterans organizations and nonprofits. Again, they allow me to, with clearance by compliance, to invest in startups. I'm actually in the speaking circuit, what Hillary Clinton, I think, described as the highest form of white collar crime in America. One of the few allowed to do that at KKR. But it's a very, very stimulating and enjoyable existence. And again, the quality of the people is absolutely superb. There's a no jerks rule here, and we're pretty good at making sure that those that are hired are not that. And if somehow somebody slips through, it'll be figured out sooner or later, and we'll allow them to move on to something else. But it's, again, I cannot imagine a better position. And they were ahead of their times. Again, Henry Kravis, one of the co-founders, and George Roberts, the other, who have been with us now for 50 years. There was one other early on who was a good bit older and retired. What they have built is absolutely extraordinary. They keep getting new big ideas. We've had a great leadership transition, something like 4 or 5 years ago already. They're still the co-executive chairman, still very active. But what they've established, it was the cutting edge. It really invented private equity, as we know it back in those days, as leveraged buyouts, but now into all kinds of other areas as well. And to see this and to be part of it, again, has really been a privilege.
Now, General, as we begin our closing, I want to understand your life was spent in a very disciplined military environment. Now you're in the private sector. What are the central differences between a life that was in government, military, and then private sector? How do you adapt to that? What flexibility does that require?
I think the qualities that enable someone to have a successful career in uniform or in government are very similar to those that enable you to achieve some success in the private sector. You got to work hard. Again, life's a competitive endeavor. You embrace it. Try to be the best you can be. Work very hard at that. Be the best team player you can be along the way. You never know when you're going to need them, but you should do it just because that's the right thing to do to begin with. But, again, a lot of life is about hustling. I understand those that can say, well, I want to focus more on this part of my life than that. That's great. But it's not that common that those that want to have a certain type of balance, if you will, in some ways or whatever, are going to be competitive with those who are pouring everything they can. That doesn't mean you can't have time with family. It doesn't mean, although I have to confess, I think I was in a combat zone on the 4th of July for 8 of my final 11 4th of July. So there wasn't much balance, and happily the family was great. My wife was very, very capable of handling everything, and then had her own career toward the final decade of our time in uniform as well, and quite a successful one. So again, I think people are deluding themselves if they think that they can do the bare minimum and achieve success. It's just not that common. There may be some geniuses out there that have that spark that others lack that might be able to pull that off. But in general, the successful people in life are those who are pretty driven while still maintaining a degree of balance, for sure. And that's, I think, the reality. So again, when I'm asked, what do you advise? It starts out with the reality of life, which is that it is competitive, and you got to embrace it, and you need to compete. And if you don't wholeheartedly, then just understand that you're probably not going to attain the very top levels of whatever it is in which you're engaged.
General, I think you have been a very open, transparent, authentic partner in this expedition. I think you've helped a lot of people. Whether you are familiar day to day with this victim society and this kind of mentality that you are entitled to this or entitled to that, I think you've done a great deal in expressing today, openly and honestly, the reality. Facts are stubborn things. Life is a competitive sport, and I think you've articulated it well. You have not only articulated it well in your words, but in your life's behavior. David
Look, Michael, I
Petraeus.
think people are entitled to what they earn.
That's
I mean, they
right.
should
I
be.
do too.
People should be given an opportunity. I think that is true. You get more opportunities the harder you work. You know all these adages. Again, the
I
harder I
do,
work,
and
the
I
luckier I
believe
get.
them,
And again, luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. I spent a lifetime preparing for what came along, and now it's very possible I could have done that, and the timing would not have been right, and I wouldn't have been in the positions I was in, and they wouldn't have kept calling my number for. Again, I had 6 consecutive commands as a general officer, 5 of which were in combat. I don't think there's too many others over history that have had that kind of opportunity. But again, I worked hard to achieve the
yeah, but
opportunity.
General, what I want to end with is this. I think people are entitled to all the success they earn.
Mm-hmm.
And you have earned a great deal. But isn't it also true, General, that you didn't earn it on a 35-hour work week or a 40-hour work week? Isn't that true? Isn't it also true that you dedicated yourself on a lot of nights and weekends, and you weren't spending much of your Sundays, watching 3 or 4 football games? You were working your tail
Oh,
off,
I would
sir.
if I was multitasking. There's nothing better than watching Sunday football while working out.
All right. Well, there you go. General, thank you for your time.
No, it's
You have
great
been
to
a
be with you.
delight.
Thanks.
Thank
You
you.
bet.
Really
Very
appreciate
much.
it. I look forward to staying in touch. God bless.
Absolutely. Thanks very much.
Bye. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, I have been doing this show for exactly 11 years, and I cannot remember a conversation I found more ultimately valuable than General David Petraeus. Honest, transparent, authentic, about the rules for success, both in his life and in your life. Life indeed is a competitive sport, friends, and denying that isn't a tool for making it any less competitive. I'm very honored that he spent time with us, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. We'll be back with another edition of Without Notes before long, but in the meantime, you can support these conversations by liking the episode, commenting, sharing, and perhaps most importantly, subscribing. This is a way of you voting on behalf of these real, authentic conversations with no notes. I'm Michael Levine, and we'll see you on the next episode.